Whatever you think about Justin Trudeau's policies, you can't deny that he understands the importance of branding, and it's been arguably the biggest key to his success. When you think of the word branding, you might think of advertising or social media, but they aren't the same thing. Branding is the core meaning and public identity one has, whereas advertising is just one way to communicate that meaning to the world. This is something that corporations have understood for a long time, and there's a growing realization that most people don't actually buy products for their benefits or features at all.
People can only buy a complete brand. People don't buy products. They don't buy packages. They don't buy brand names. And they most certainly don't buy advertising. They buy the sum total of all those things.
And in much the same way, we don't necessarily vote for politicians based on their policies. We vote for them based on their brand identities. Justin Trudeau used this to his advantage early on by aligning himself with movements like feminism, multiculturalism, and Black Lives Matter. But meet Gerald Butts. He's been called Justin Trudeau's brander-in-chief. The two met at McGill University, where they became close friends and eventually formed a team that would help take the Liberal Party from third place to first place in only 2 years. A gifted strategist, he would help build Justin's carefully crafted public image. You might remember Justin's famous response to this question.
I understand one of the priorities for you was to have a cabinet that was gender balanced. Why was that so important to you?
Because it's 2015.
What you might not know is that this wasn't a spontaneous moment at all. It was carefully planned and rehearsed by Gerald Butts.
I think just calling people's attention to the year is all you really need to say.
Because it's 2015.
Justin's focus on branding and social media might remind you of another famous politician.
Somebody recently said to me, Mr. President, you are so yesterday. Justin Trudeau has completely replaced you. He's so handsome, he's so charming. He's the future. And I said, Justin, just give it a rest.
And so perhaps it's no surprise that when one successful brand meets another, they would form
A bromance. Although I still think dude-plomacy is more accurate, but I'll get over it.
In many ways, the campaign that got Justin Trudeau elected seemed to echo Barack Obama's own message of hope in the slogan, "Yes, we can." After Justin was elected Prime Minister in 2015, he gave his famous Sunny Ways speech, which was a similar promise of change and positivity in the way that government was run. This became a key part of Justin Trudeau's brand, and we can see this in a speech he gave at the World Economic Forum in January 2016 called The Canadian Opportunity.
Leadership should be focused on extending the ladder of opportunity to everyone, on pursuing policies that create growth, and on ensuring that growth produces tangible results for everyone.
This essentially is the idea of meritocracy, a system where through talent, hard work, and achievement, anyone can rise to the top. It's one of the most cherished stories we have about how society works, or at least how it's supposed to. And in Canada, where there's the promise of universal health care, access to education, and commitment to multiculturalism, it's the belief that success shouldn't be about who you know or what social class you're born into. It's about merit, ability, and work ethic. It's the idea that all of us should have an equal opportunity to pursue our dreams. But Canadians are facing challenges never before seen in our history. Costs are higher than ever just to live in Canada. Rising costs of rent and real estate have made home ownership out of reach for many Canadians. The cost of education is also higher than it's ever been. And even if you have a university degree, it's no longer a guarantee of a good job. Students today find themselves graduating into the most difficult job market in decades, while at the same time servicing ever higher levels of debt. And it's not just younger people feeling these effects. It's Canadians at every level of society. Of course, none of this tells us who Justin Trudeau really is underneath all the branding and social media. Because a brand, no matter how carefully crafted, isn't real. It's a persona, a kind of public performance. And brands don't have to be consistent with their actions. A company like Disney has a brand that's focused on celebrating the magic of childhood. When you buy a Disney product, watch a Disney movie, or visit their theme park, you're buying the experience of recapturing the imagination and creativity of youth. But Disney has also been investigated for using child labor to make its products, where children work in factories in horrendous conditions to make toys they'll never play with. And despite this, Disney is one of the most successful corporations in the world. That is the power of branding. The Disney brand almost automatically makes you think of warm childhood memories and nostalgia. We don't even think about their ethical violations, no matter how horrifying they turn out to be. So what can we say about Justin Trudeau's brand? When we look at the last 6 years, how does his track record compare to his branding? Before we answer that, let's consider the difference between two different kinds of games. The first kind of game is checkers. Every piece in a game of checkers can only move in exactly the same way, diagonally and forward. If a piece reaches the other side of the board, it becomes king, and a king can move backward or forward on the board. The second kind of game is chess. In chess, not every piece has the same chance of success, and not every piece has the same privileges. The goal is to protect your own king, no matter what the cost, even if it means sacrificing the other pieces on the board. Because if you lose your king, you lose the game. If our society is built like a checkerboard, then it's a system of free and equal opportunity for every piece on the board. It's a level playing field where everyone has a chance to succeed. But if our society is like a chessboard, then it's not a meritocracy at all, because not every piece has the same chance of making it. Privilege is deeply embedded into the game itself. In chess, the king is the most privileged piece of all, and yet the king didn't earn his position. He's not more talented, intelligent, or more hardworking than anyone else. It's just an accident of birth. And what's troubling is that for all his time as Prime Minister, despite everything his branding would seem to suggest, Justin Trudeau has been running the country as if it were a chessboard, where everyone else is expendable, and where he's been protected every step of the way. And much like any king, his special position wasn't necessarily gained through any unique ability, talent, or hard work, but through the good luck of being born with a famous last name, the son of a former prime minister, with good looks and a combination of both male privilege and white privilege, all of which are pure accidents of birth. Let's look at how this is played out in Justin Trudeau's time as Prime Minister. Justin Trudeau has branded himself as a feminist.
It's not only that men can be feminists, it's that men should be feminists as well. And I am proud of that.
After the hashtag #MeToo swept through the world and through social media, Justin was quick to align his brand with the movement, declaring a zero-tolerance policy for any kind of harassment.
I'm expecting that we listen, believe, and support women who come forward. The standard applies to everyone. There is no context in which someone doesn't have responsibility for things they've done in the past.
But Trudeau insists one name you won't see on that list is his.
I don't think so. I've been very, very careful all my life to be thoughtful and to be respectful of people's space and people's headspace as well.
But these comments would come back to haunt him when a sexual assault allegation was made against Trudeau himself.
I do not feel that I acted inappropriately in any way.
The allegation dates back to a BC festival in August of 2000. It accused Trudeau of groping and inappropriately handling an unnamed young female reporter. The editorial says when Trudeau was asked about the incident, he responded, "I'm sorry, if I had known you were reporting for a national paper, I never would have been so forward."
So did Justin Trudeau step down in the face of these allegations? Of course not, and no one in his caucus or cabinet suggested that he should. But here's what happened to other politicians who were accused of similar misconduct.
Trudeau has dealt with sexual misconduct time and time again since becoming Liberal leader. Backbenchers Scott Andrews, Massimo Pichetti, Darshan Kang, all suspended or expelled from caucus since 2014.
And that is hypocrisy. Justin punishes others for past mistakes while at the same time downplaying his own. If anyone else is accused of harassment, then a zero-tolerance policy is applied and they're removed. But if Justin Trudeau is accused, then much like in a game of chess, we must protect the king at all costs. We see a similar pattern where Justin brands himself as a multicultural ally, even kneeling in a photo op at a Black Lives Matter protest. But then these images came to light.
I dressed up in an Aladdin costume and put makeup on. I shouldn't have done that.
These mistakes would easily get any ordinary person fired from their job, ruining their reputation for decades. But again, Justin Trudeau isn't treated like an ordinary person. If it's a chessboard, then he's the king, and so we protect the king at all costs. Justin Trudeau branded himself as the sunny ways leader who would hold himself to the highest ethical standards, but instead, he became the first Canadian Prime Minister ever to break the ethics statute not once, but twice. In a recent scandal, Justin Trudeau's government gave the We Charity a multi-million-dollar contract to administer more than $900 million to help students hard hit by the economic downturn. Almost immediately, there were questions about Trudeau's family ties to the charity. At first, we denied that there was any financial connection, but it was later revealed that Justin Trudeau's mother, Margaret, was paid at least $250,000, and his brother, Alexandre, was paid at least $32,000. Justin's wife, Sophie Gregoire Trudeau, also hosted a wellness podcast for We Charity, and it now appears that the charity paid for many of their expenses. What's even more problematic is that Justin Trudeau never disclosed his family's financial ties to the We Charity before the award of the contract, and he never removed himself from those government discussions.
I made a mistake in not recusing myself immediately from the discussions, and I'm sincerely sorry. I knew that my brother and my mother work as professional public speakers, and it is not surprising to me that they got paid by We, but I did not know the details, and as I said, I should have known the details.
This has raised concerns that he put himself in a conflict of interest, and it's raised questions that he may have acted to enrich himself and his own family. Watch how he completely avoids answering even the most basic and direct questions about this.
Nobody believes you when you say you don't know how much money your family has got from the We Group. You've had a month to look into that. You knew you were going to testify here. Again, how much money total have your brother, mother, and spouse received from this organization? How much?
That information has been publicly shared, but I will highlight.
Well, then tell me what it is.
My mother
How much?
has
just the dollar figure.
Throughout her life.
The dollar figure, Prime Minister.
In various ways, and is
how much
of the work that she's done, and I'm proud of her.
How
as well.
much?
I don't have it in front of me, and quite
you don't
frankly,
know how much your family has received from this organization, which you tried to give $500 million. Really?
My mother has worked as an advocate.
The dollar figure, Prime Minister.
We Charity had no past experience handling a contract of this size and scope, and yet Justin Trudeau insisted that the We Charity was the only organization that could run the program, a claim that was challenged by many.
We already have that program. It's called the Canada Summer Jobs Program. So if the Prime Minister wanted more of that, he could have just increased funding for that program. So the fact that he directed it to this one organization suggested favoritism.
This is such a huge conflict of interest.
Justin, you cannot give $1 billion to people that your family work for.
And after all of these problems were uncovered, Justin Trudeau prorogued Parliament, which made it impossible to fully debate these issues. Finance Minister Bill Morneau also had financial ties to the We Charity. Morneau had given them 2 significant donations worth $50,000, and he also tried to repay $41,366 in expenses that he says he didn't realize that he spent when he accepted trips from the charity, which is a serious violation of ethics rules. After an investigation, the Ethics Commissioner's report found that the relationship between Mr. Morneau and We Charity included an unusually high degree of involvement and afforded We unfettered access to the office of the Minister of Finance, which amounted to preferential treatment. So what happened next? The We Charity withdrew from the contract, and the students who would have benefited from the program were left in limbo. Morneau resigned as finance minister, but predictably, Justin Trudeau was cleared. Once again, other chess pieces fall, but we protect the king at all costs. This might be Justin Trudeau's most recent scandal, but it's not the first time his decisions have come under fire. A big part of Justin Trudeau's brand is about supporting the working class, and yet many of his decisions end up enriching the elite.
Can you justify to taxpayers why the federal government lent Bombardier $372.5 million if the company has the money to pay their top executives so lavishly?
We know that aerospace is one of the areas in which Canadians excel and will continue to rely on growth and good jobs for many years to come.
But this doesn't answer the question. He talks about creating good jobs, but how does that explain the fact that Bombardier laid off 14,500 workers and then used the money to pay millions of dollars to senior executives who were already wealthy? We see this again in December of 2016, when Justin Trudeau took a vacation with his family to the wealthy Aga Khan's private island in the Bahamas. The vacation, which cost $215,000, seemed to put Justin in another conflict of interest, because the Aga Khan had lobbied the Canadian government in the past, receiving millions of dollars for his foundation. What's more, after Justin returned from the vacation, he failed to recuse himself from government discussions that could benefit the Aga Khan Foundation.
You were going to take a free holiday from someone you consider a friend. How could it not have occurred to you that that might not have been okay?
The fact is, we work sorry, let me just try to reorder the thoughts. We worked with the lobby conflict of interest commissioner on a regular basis on a broad range of issues when the issues come up. Obviously there was a mistake.
Say to yourself, this is not maybe the best thing to do.
The ethics commissioner found that Justin had broken 4 different sections of the Ethics Act, making him the first Canadian Prime Minister to do so. But perhaps most damaging is the SNC-Lavalin scandal, where an investigation showed that Justin Trudeau illegally pressured Attorney General Jody Wilson-Raybould to save SNC-Lavalin, one of Canada's largest engineering companies, from criminal prosecution.
At the center of it was an attorney general who claimed she had been improperly pressured to help the Quebec engineering giant avoid criminal prosecution. And then you had a prime minister saying that was simply not the case. Well, today, the ethics commissioner disagreed. The scathing report describes how Trudeau engaged in a flagrant attempt to influence Jody Wilson-Raybould to further SNC-Lavalin's private interests, and declared that Trudeau and his office used their authority to circumvent, undermine, and ultimately attempt to discredit Wilson-Raybould's authority as Attorney General.
In the aftermath, 2 women MPs, Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott, were removed from the Liberal Party caucus, raising further concerns that even though Justin's brand is publicly aligned with feminism and Indigenous rights, behind closed doors and when the cameras are off, the reality seems very different. SNC was such a damaging scandal that even his brander-in-chief, Gerald Butts, decided to step down amid the controversy. A familiar pattern. Whatever pieces fall, we protect the king at all costs. So now we face a snap election on September 20th, 2021, which Justin Trudeau called just 2 years since the last election. But why so soon, in the middle of a pandemic, when the world seems to be on the brink of a 4th wave of COVID-19? Justin says that the minority parliament had become toxic and dysfunctional. But is this true? Christopher Alcantara, an associate professor of political science at Wilfrid Laurier University, says that Parliament was actually functioning quite well in terms of accomplishing the government's legislative agenda, and that it was not dysfunctional at all, but rather working as it should. So what's the real reason for the election? Dwayne Bratt, a professor of political science at Mount Royal University, says that the real reason for the election is that it's a calculated power grab. I think Trudeau's plan is to find a sweet spot where COVID is close to being over, but not completely over. So there's still goodwill over the government's vaccine procurement and all of the economic supports without thinking about how we're going to pay all this money back. There's actually a pretty good chance that Justin Trudeau's power grab will work. Historically, calling snap elections often pays off for the party in power. Prime Minister Jean Chrétien went from winning just 38% of the vote in 1997 to increasing his seats in popular vote in the 2000 election. And John Diefenbaker called an election just 9 months after the previous one and gained 96 seats. This might be the most important election of our generation. With the emerging conflict in Afghanistan and a looming economic recession where costs of living continue to rise, who you choose to be Prime Minister will have lasting repercussions in the years to come. In the midst of a worldwide pandemic, Trudeau has announced $1 billion to be put towards vaccine passports, most likely through an app on your phone. But given what we know about the We Charity scandal, the Aga Khan scandal, and SNC-Lavalin, is there any guarantee that this is going to be done in a way that's free from corporate interests? Because if there's anything we've learned in our modern world, it's that technology can be hacked, security compromised, and private information can be sold, regardless of the promises made at the beginning. More importantly, how will this information be used? And no matter how well-intentioned, what guarantee is there that the passport won't be expanded to include every health condition you might have? These are complex questions that must be debated. Right now, Justin Trudeau has a minority government, which means he has to work with the other parties in Parliament to pass legislation. He has to compromise and find common ground in order to get things done. This might be a slower process, but in the end, the laws that do get passed are more balanced and take into consideration the interests of more Canadians. The fact that Justin calls this need for compromise toxic and dysfunctional is telling, because that's exactly how minority governments are supposed to work. Complex issues have to be debated in Parliament. If Justin Trudeau wins a majority government, then he can pass any legislation he wants without compromising with any of the other parties. He gets to be the king of the chessboard. And that's really what's at stake here. Do we live in a meritocracy or not? Because if we really lived in a meritocracy, if the most talented, hardworking, and most ethical people always rose to the top, would Justin Trudeau ever become Prime Minister? If he didn't have his famous last name, if he wasn't born the son of another Prime Minister, is there any possible timeline where Justin would become the most powerful man in Canada? This isn't just about showing that Justin Trudeau is too ethically compromised to continue as Prime Minister. It's about showing that through his own actions and his many lapses in judgment, he's creating exactly the kind of country that's the opposite of a meritocracy. A country where there's one set of rules for him, his friends, and the elite, and a completely different set of rules for everyone else. And so long as the old systems of privilege are in place to protect the king at all costs, we cannot have equality. In the end, we have a choice. We can build a world that rewards good people, who act ethically, and who develop their talents to bring real and positive change to the world. Or we can continue with the fake change that comes from carefully crafted branding campaigns, the empty promises of sunny ways, followed by public apology after public apology. Justin Trudeau is betting that your memory is short, that you've forgotten all about the actions of his past, that you'll be persuaded by the slick commercials, photo ops, and branding. But whether that's true is entirely up to you. To put the king in check, you don't have to know anything about chess. You just have to make your voice heard on September 20th. Whatever your political leanings may be, please exercise your right to vote.